I'm going just to welcome all the attendees once again tonight. Thank you for joining again for our webinar, which is entitled The Basics of Burgundy Wine. So we welcome Mr. Alexis Caraux again on our platform tonight. Thank you, Alexis, for joining again tonight. After you presented the basics of the French wine. So today we're focusing mainly on the Burgundy wines. So we started now focusing on regions, the wine regions of France, and I will leave the floor to you so you can start. Thank you very much.
Okay, so welcome for this new presentation. This one is focused, dedicated to the Burgundy wine region, so the home of world-class Chardonnays and Pinot Noir. So if you like enjoying Chardonnay or Pinot Noir, that's really the place to go, the place to know. This is really the reference in the world for those wines. So it's one of my favorite regions. So I'm very happy to present Burgundy together tonight. So just this webinar, it's just 1 hour together. Don't hesitate to interrupt if you have any questions. All right. Just a quick presentation about myself. I'm a French sommelier. I'm a wine consultant. I'm working in the wine business since 2011. So I'm going to be quick on my bio because that's not the subject for today. But I have founded Millésy Wine, which is a wine tasting classes company. So I've been welcoming people from all over the world to teach French wine. And I've been also training restaurant staff. I've been traveling and giving lectures in different countries. Also working as the director of our appellation. And today I'm mostly a wine educator online and working with other different companies in different countries. Okay, so you can follow me.
Excuse me, Alexis. I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute, just to add something that Alexis actually is our partner sommelier and wine expert, and he will be giving very soon master classes as part of our online master classes in September. Thank you, Alexis.
You're welcome. Thank you. So you can also follow me on Instagram. You have my Instagram account. It will be a pleasure. So this is a few pictures of me with clients doing wines and also on the Loire Valley. So I'm going to be quick on this. Okay, so this is the organization of the presentation for today. I have divided the presentation into 4 different parts. So in the first part, I'm going to talk about geography and figures about the Burgundy region. On the part number 2, we're going to see the 2 major grapes, the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but also the different styles of wines. Okay, so that's going to be part number 2. Part number 3, we're going to focus on the labels, how to read Burgundy labels and how to understand all the different cru and especially the different the layer of in terms of quality. And on the last part, I'm going to give you where to find the best value wines in Burgundy. Okay, so well, let's get started with the first part, which is about geography and figures. So first, I'd like to show first on the map of France where is Burgundy actually. So you can see Burgundy really in the center, in the heart of France, on the east part of France. So if you know a bit of France, this is between Champagne and Beaujolais, the Rhône. You have the Loire Valley, and this is on the east of the Loire. This is a small region in Burgundy compared to the other French wine region. That is really much smaller than Bordeaux, than the Languedoc, than the Loire. And I'm going to give you a few figures just in a moment, but that's a small region, Burgundy. And usually when I present the France and the French wines, I like to divide the France, the country, in 2 different parts, the northern part and the southern. That's more like a vineyard, which is in the north part of France. That means getting a cooler climate, so much fresher, much cooler continental climate than other vineyards in the south of France. Okay. So a few figures, they come from 2 years ago, 2018, but they really represent what Burgundy is and the production, because it does not change a lot every year. So it's really the almost the same figures every year. So basically, first, Burgundy wine, that's just 3% of the French vineyards in France. So that's really small, and 3%. I was just saying that it's small compared to Bordeaux, compared to the Languedoc. That's a small place, and we're going to see this a bit later on, but Burgundy wine produces the most expensive wine in the world. And one of the reasons is that that's the small vineyard and the small production. So it's also very expensive because the production is very limited in quantity. So when everybody wants the same wine, the prices go very high. Okay, so 3% of the French vineyard is a majority of white wines in Burgundy. That's more than 60%. So majority of whites, 30% of red wines approximately, and the remaining wines, these are sparkling wines produced also in the region. So we're going to focus mainly and mostly on whites and red wines in Burgundy on this presentation. Okay, that's really about still wine, this presentation. So when we dive now into the region, you can see that Burgundy is divided in 5 different parts, 5 sub-regions. Okay, so it's not it's a bit discontinuing vineyard. So you have on one part the Chablis sub-region. So Chablis, I'm sure you know, because it's one of the most famous French wines outside France, Chablis. So you have first Chablis, which is more in the north part of Burgundy, and then you have the Cote de Nuit, the famous Cote de Nuit, the Cote de Beaune, and then a bit more south you get the Coachellanes and Mâconnais. And just after the Mâconnais, that's the beginning of the Beaujolais. Okay, so you have also a small map of France on the right, and to locate where's the vineyards they are. But let's say that keep in mind these 5 different sub-regions, because I'm going to come back to those just later on. Okay, and among these 5 sub-regions, the Côte de Nuit and the Côte de Beaune are really the 2 most prestigious sub-regions where they produce the most prestigious wines. Okay, both Pinot Noir, the reds, and Chardonnay for the whites. That's really where you find those amazing terroir and amazing wines. So you have 2 examples on the right, a bottle of Clos Vougeot, a Grand Cru, and a bottle of Montrachet. If you see the shape of the bottle, you always find this typical Burgundy shape, very different than the shapes of bottles that you can find in Bordeaux, for instance. Okay. So if we look more closely to these different sub-regions, first we can say that in Chablis they produce 100% of white wine. So a Chablis wine will always be white. That's the first thing. Okay, Chablis only white. Then if we look at the others, the Côte de Nuit, that's mostly red. They produce a bit of white as well, but the biggest production is red wine, the most prestigious red wines. Then a bit more south, that's the Côte de Beaune. Côte de Beaune, that's mostly white, okay? And they have a few reds as well, but that's the majority of white wine. And then the Coachellanes, it's half and half, both colors, reds and whites. And we finish with the Mâconnais, that's mostly white. So mostly white in the Mâconnais, Chablis 100% white, and you can see that there is a majority of white wines in Burgundy. This is changing a little bit, and there is more and more red wine because people also enjoy the reds from the region, but still the whites, that's the big majority. Okay, so if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write down your questions, and at the end of the presentation, I can answer all the questions that you might have on the geography. So now, after the geography, I want to talk about the grapes and the styles of the wine. So it's kind of easy Burgundy side because white wine, that's the Chardonnay, red wine, that's the Pinot Noir. That's the first thing to remember. That's the case for the huge majority of more than 91% of the wines that are made of these two major grapes. So if you have to remember only two grape varieties, remember that that's the Chardonnay grape for the whites. So 100% Chardonnay for the whites, and the reds, that's the Pinot Noir, 100% Pinot Noir, okay? But you have this remaining 8-9%. You might come across a bottle of Aligoté. So an Aligoté, you will see that's a white wine. That's another grape that's called Aligoté, and Gamay for the red wines. Okay. Sorry. Aligoté is also famous for an aperitif that we drink a lot in France. It's a kir. The kir was made originally from the Aligoté, okay, with some cassis cream, cassis liqueur. So let's continue talk about the styles of the wines. The first thing to notice is that all the wines, they are dry, okay? They don't produce any sweet wines in Burgundy. That's dry white and dry red wines. Then you can imagine that you can see that the region is really spread into the north and the south. So depending on where you are in Burgundy, the climate will change, will be a bit different, will be cooler in the north, much warmer in the south. So basically, if you go on the north part of Burgundy, that's the Chablis subregions, the wines, they are much lighter and they have this crisp acidity. So a typical Chablis has this crisp, light acidity, very refreshing. And most Chablis, they are not aged in oak, and they are unoaked. So very fruity with always this buttery and citrus flavors. So very refreshing because really on the cooler part on the north. And then the more you're gonna go south in Burgundy, the more body and alcohol you're gonna find in the wines, because the more you go south, the warmer the climate will be, and so the grapes, they get more sugar, more alcohol, and less acidity. So again, lighter and crisp wine in the north, and more body and alcohol in the south, and especially for the whites in the Mâconnais. Basically, the whites that are produced within the Cote de Nuit and Coachellanes, lots of these wines, they are aged in oak, and these oaky flavors also bring some complexity and some typical. I love this walnut and nutty flavors that you get when you drink those wines. So the wines produced in the Cote de Nuit and Coachellanes, they are aged in oak. Usually it's approximately 1 year, 12 months. It can be a bit more and a bit less depending on the wineries, but they like to give this oak aging to smooth a bit the wines, to give them body and complexity. And so the typical Chardonnay flavors, and again, always these buttery flavors, a bit milky, fruity, and earthy flavors for the best terroir. And the level of complexity depends really on the terroir, but I'm going to dive into the different terroirs just later on. A few words about the styles of the red wines. Well, first, the typical Pinot Noir flavors is really on the red fruits, on the cherry, these typical cherry flavors, plum, and always some peppery notes. So you always find this mix of spices, peppery notes, and the fruitier flavors. Again, it's a bit like the level of complexity really depends on the terroir and also the aging process. Some reds will be non-oaked. That's most of the time the entry-level red wines in the wineries, and then the other wines they have this oak aging to bring complexity and to smooth all the tannins. So the reds, so the best red wines that are produced in the Cote de Nuit. That's the most prestigious place for the reds. And then there, the reds, they have a higher body and higher tannins as well, and also a good aging potential. But about the aging potential, always keep in mind that a wine made of Pinot Noir will always have a lower aging potential than other red wines like in Bordeaux or in the Rhone, because the level of tannins is much lower with the Pinot Noir. Then there you can find also a few reds in the Cote de Beaune, very elegant as well. And in the Coachellanes, the red wines are more, I would say, lighter, more easy drinking Pinot Noir. Okay, so a bit less edge also in oak for the red in the Coachellanes. All right, so that's the typical Pinot Noir Burgundy style. Now let's talk about the labels and the cru. So that's maybe the most important part to understand, to be able to read the labels and to understand what you have behind a label and behind some notations. So just a first reminder, when you come across a French wine label, you always find 4 pieces of information when you read a French label. You will always find the name of the winery. So that can be a Domaine. For Bordeaux, that's a chateau, but it's Burgundy, that's a Domaine. Or that can be just the name of the winemaker, okay, of the wine grower or winemaker. That's the first information, so the name of the winery, okay? Second information, that's the location. So the location will give you exactly where the grapes come from. So we're gonna talk about this a bit later. So if you want to know what's the location, just search on the label, search for the appellation, okay? Name of the wine also, that's a third information, because usually the wineries, they produce different wines. So each wine has its own name. It's most of the time the name of the wine that's a reference to a plot of vines, okay? And the vintage, of course, the vintage, the year of the harvest. So just if you look on the right on this label, so we have here Burgundy label, name of the winery, we have Domaine Le Fleuve, that's the name of the winery. Location, so let's find the appellation. It says appellation Puligny-Montrachet Premier Cru Contrôlé. So Puligny-Montrachet, that's the place, that's the name of a village in Burgundy, in the Cote de Beaune. What else do we have? I'm going to explain also the Premier Cru just in a moment. And the name of the wine, it says Les Pucelles. So Les Pucelles, that's the name of a famous plot of vines. So you know exactly where the grapes come from, okay? And the vintage, here we don't see the vintage, but most of Burgundy wines, they have some upper label with the vintage, or sometimes they have a back label, but you will always find also the vintage. A reminder also about the appellations in France, because that's something very French. Keep in mind that the French appellations, they always refer to a particular location. So that can be a plot of vine, that can be a village, that can be a region, okay? So it gives you the place again where the grapes come from. The appellations in France, they were created to identify different terroirs. Okay, because the winemaking, it has been done since so long ago, and after all these centuries, the people, the wine growers, they knew exactly what to grow on which terroir. So each terroir has a different real identity. Appellations were created to really identify those different terroirs. And a terroir is a combination of a soil characteristic, what's on the underground, but also that's it's about the landscape, it's about the local climate. Okay, and behind an appellation, that's a location, but not only, because behind an appellation there is also some rules. And for a winemaker to release a bottle with an appellation on the label, the winemaker has to comply with some rules, the rules of the appellation. So it's usually about viticulture, but it can be also about winemaking. So I'm not entering into much details about the appellation. We can come back on this later on if you have any question. So here you have another label, Domaine Faivelet, that's the name of the winery. It says appellation Cote de Nuit Grand Cru. So Cote de Nuit, that's the location where the grapes are produced. Appellations in Burgundy. So coming back again to this, the same label. Example here is appellation Cote de Nuit Grand Cru Contrôlé. So in Burgundy, there is some system of quality with different levels. Okay, so all the appellations, they are not on the same level. Some are, let's say, more generic, okay, less restricted, and some are really focused on the best terroir. So I'm going to show you an example just in a moment. So Burgundy is kind of complex because first it looks simple because just 2 grape varieties, but then you can see that they have 84 appellations in Burgundy. So you can really spend some time learning all the different appellations in Burgundy. This takes some time. So to explain the level of qualities in the wines in Burgundy and the different levels for the appellations, I like to show this this slide just right here, and that's maybe one of the most important slide to understand. Basically, let's say that you see these different levels. You have on the basis, you have the region or district, then you have the village, just upper you have villages and premier cru, and on the top you have the grand cru. Let's say that the more you go up on this pyramid, the more the quality and the best wines, and of course also the highest priced and highest prices and the rarity. Basically, the entry-level wines, they are just labeled as Burgundy, that's the region. Or it can be also a district, which is just a bit smaller than the whole region. But that's almost half of the production. So half of the production, you just buy a bottle of Bourgogne, that's Burgundy. Means that the grapes, they can come from anywhere in Burgundy. Okay, that's the entry-level wine. Then just above this generic appellation, you have the villages. So it means that the appellation is just the name of a village. That can be Pommard, that can be Chablis. So there are many villages like this in Burgundy, Merso, for instance. It means that the grapes come from this village. Okay, so it's also a big production. It's 40% of the production in the village. But as you have the name of a village, you start to have some kind of real identity in the wine. Okay, each village is a bit different. And then you arrive on the best wines in Burgundy, the Premier Cru and the Grand Cru. So on the first layer, that's the Premier Cru. It's always also a reference to the village. So the best plot of vines inside a village, they are ranked as Premier Cru. So if we take this example of Chablis, for instance, you can have just a generic Chablis, But the best plot of vines, the premier cru, you will see on the label, Chablis premier cru. Okay? So when you see a premier cru, you really expect something good, a great wine. So that's the premier cru. If you look at all the Burgundy region, it's just a bit more than 10% of the production. And the top of the top, that's just 2% of the production. That's the Grand Cru. That's really the best terroir, the best wines, the very expensive wines, and for some of them, the most expensive wines in the world. So when you buy a Grand Cru, first it costs you a lot of money, but you get something really something complex, and you really expect something great. Okay. So this is a picture. I like to show this picture of a part of the vineyard in Burgundy. So this is the example of a Grand Cru. So what makes the difference between a Grand Cru and just a village? If you just look at the landscape, but you will see that the Grand Cru, and that's also the case for most Premier Cru, they are located on steep slopes. Okay, so here this one is famous. It's called the Corton and Corton Charlemagne Grand Cru in the Cote de Nuit. But you always find the best wines when they are produced on steep slopes. Why? Because first, the water is drained away. Let's say that the vines, they don't like to stay on the water. So the water is drained away. But also the grapes, when they grow in summertime, they have a better exposure with the sun. So the ripeness is much better on these vines. And other reasons is that the grapes, the vines, they are more protected from a strong wind or some other issues, the frost as well, and the soil is much better. So that's the case in Burgundy. Cru, the Premier Cru, they are always on slopes like this. But if you go to any great vineyard in the world, you will always find the best wines on slopes like this. That's the case in the Rhone Valley, in Italy, in Bordeaux, in everywhere. Okay. So now I want to show you a few labels just so that we can identify together what we have, how we can read the labels, what are the pieces of information we can extract from all these different labels. The first one we had, that's just Domaine du Château Gris, that's the name of the winery. You can see this one is just a generic Bourgogne, generic Burgundy, because it says just appellation Bourgogne contrôlée. So this is an example for an entry-level wine, a Bourgogne Burgundy like this. I think would cost approximately 10 euros, maybe a bit more, 10, 12 euro for a bottle like this. That's just a first entry-level Bourgogne, okay? And you have the name also of the plot. It says Clos de Nuit. All right? What else do we have? So this one, that's a Bourgogne Haute Côte de Beaune from Louis Latour. So if you look again at if you try to locate the appellation, it says appellation Bourgogne Haute Côte de Beaune contrôlée. So the appellation is Bourgogne Haute Côte de Beaune. So that's a generic again appellation, but just restricted to the Haute Côte de Beaune. So this is the example of a district. Okay, that's a bit smaller than the whole region. That's the Haute Côte de Beaune. That's again, this one is a generic entry-level Burgundy. Usually a district would cost between 10 and 15 euro for a bottle. Okay. So now here you have Merso, Tillet, Olivier Le Fleuve. So Merso, that's a famous village in Burgundy, a very high quality. So here you have an example of just the village. So let me see. Okay. So on this label, on the main label, you don't see any appellation. So we have to turn the bottle, and on the back label, it says appellation Merso contrôlée. So that's just a village here. That's a great village, the Merso. The name is Tillet. Tillet, that's the name of the plot of vine in Merso. And that's it from the Olivier Leflèvre. And that's a great, nice winery. This one, what do we have here? It says Chambol Musigny, Premier Cru Les Charmes, 2012. So that's the vintage. Just below it says Gilbert et Christine Felletic. So that's the name of the winemaker. So that's the man with his wife. So they have given their name to their winery. And if we search for the appellation notation, it says Chambol Musigny Premier Cru. Okay, so here we have the example of a village which is ranked, and we have the Premier Cru, that's the best plot of vine inside the village. So that's the example here of a Premier Cru. So we arrive here on the top of the pyramid. So when you buy a wine like this, you will expect some wine of good quality. And a typical bottle of Chambol Musigny Premier Cru, first cru like this, would cost minimum of 50 euro approximately. So you already pay something expensive for such a bottle of Burgundy wine. Okay. So here, appellation Chambol Musigny Premier Cru Contrôlé. What about this one? So this one, I already showed you this label. Remember that there was this appellation Puligny-Montrachet and again Premier Cru. So this is again a Premier Cru, something very good. And Puligny-Montrachet is one of the best villages for the Chardonnay in the Cote de Nuit. Here, appellation Puligny-Montrachet. What about this one? So it says Chateau Grenouille. And I don't know if you can see because that's a bit small. It says Chablis Grand Cru. So maybe we have a back label. Yes, we have. If we turn the bottle, it says appellation Chablis Grand Cru Contrôlé. So here we have a Chablis, but that's not just a Chablis alone, a Chablis village. It's a Chablis Grand Cru. So that's really the best of the best. Okay. So that's how you know how you find the best wines in Burgundy. So if you want to buy something great, you should have a look at these Premier Cru and Grand Cru. Okay, it's not just Chablis alone here, because Chablis, that's remember that's really in the north of Burgundy, and Chablis they produce just a Chablis alone, the village. They also produce some Premier Cru and they have a few Grand Cru. All right, so now I want to dive into the different sub-regions and give you where to find the best value wines in Burgundy. Well, first, the Chablis sub-region, really in the north. What I like with Chablis is that wines, they're still affordable compared to the Cote de Nuit, the Cote de Beaune. If we talk about the Premier Cru and the Grand Cru, they're still affordable. They are not cheap, but for 25 euros, you can buy Chablis Premier Cru. 25, I would say between 20 and 30 euros, you get a good Premier Cru. Okay. Now, if you want to buy a Chablis Grand Cru, I think you would spend 40 euros. It's going up now, so even 45, 50 euros for a Chablis Grand Cru. But if you want to test what Grand Cru is, you can still buy Chablis. It's still affordable, and you can still find the wines on the market. Okay. Now, if we go to the Cote de Nuit, so remember, Cote de Nuit, that's very famous for the red wine. That's the best red Pinot Noir. If you want the best here, you should have a look at the villages and Premier Cru from a few villages. Gevrey-Chambertin, a very famous village in the Cote de Nuit. So Chambol Musigny. So remember, we just saw a bottle of Chambol Musigny. Romane, and Nuit Saint-Georges. So these four, you really get the best villages, and all these different villages, Chambertin, Chambol-Musny, Romane, and Nuit Saint-Georges, they have a few wines ranked as premier cru. Okay. And also on the Cote de Nuit, you will find a few Grand Cru, which are the most expensive wines in the village. You would spend approximately 25 for the minimum price for the villages. But if you want to buy a Premier Cru, you would spend, okay. And then if you want to buy a Grand Cru, I don't expect to spend less than 100 euro for a bottle of wine. And the problem also is not only the price, is that it's also difficult to find, because most of the wineries, if you just go and visit them, they don't have any wines for sale because everything is sold in advance. Okay, so you have to be on the list to get some of the best wines. So that's why it's also a big issue for Burgundy, because in the world everybody wants some to drink. So this makes the prices going very crazy. On the Cote de Nuit, there's a myth. You might have heard of this one, Domaine de la Romane et Conti. So they produce this unique wine, legendary wine, the Romane Conti, which is well, maybe the most expensive wine. If you want to buy a bottle like this, it would cost you approximately, prices on the market, it's about 15,000 euro for just one bottle. So it's completely crazy. It has become a luxury thing, buying those wines. So, and be careful if you want to buy such a bottle, because some people now, they make a lot of money creating fake bottles. So make sure that you buy a real one if you have enough money to buy a bottle of Romane Conti. Okay. So Cote de Beaune, where to find the best wines in the Cote de Beaune? Again, you should look at a few villages and Premier Cru. So you have Pommard and Volnay. These two villages, they produce only red wines, so delicious red wines at Pommard and Volnay. And they have also a few Premier Cru. And then Cote de Beaune is a famous wine. So we saw a bottle of merso, if you remember. The merso, Puligny-Montrachet, and Chassagne-Montrachet, these are the three best villages for the whites in Burgundy. And one that I like to recommend, which is not yet so famous, so you can still find affordable and good value for money wines, that's Saint-Aubin. Okay, so Saint-Aubin, it's interesting because the quality has really improved, and they're almost at the same level than the Chassagne-Montrachet or Puligny. And of course, also on the Cote de Beaune, you find the famous Grand Cru. So if we talk about prices, villages, you would pay minimum of 30 euro for a village, for a bottle of merso, for instance. For the Premier Cru, you can add another 20 euros, so minimum would be 50 euro. And I can see today, because I regularly receive some private wine sale and Premier Cru, some of them now are even above 100 euro. And the Grand Cru, you will not spend less than 100 euros for the great Burgundy white Grand Cru. Okay, so much more expensive than buying a Chablis Grand Cru. So in the Cote de Beaune, they have also another myth. That's the Montrachet. Very few bottles available, very expensive. So I was lucky to test the Montrachet one day. I was at the right place at the right moment. So that's an amazing experience, but bottles that are very difficult to find. Now, if you go a bit more south, you arrive in the Coachellanes. You can find nice villages and Premier Cru in Mercurey or Rully. I really recommend the Rully because really that's a lovely place for the whites. They produce also a bit of some red wines, but the white really some are very interesting. Villages usually around 15 euros, so you see it's less expensive. And Premier Cru can have some around 20 euros and a bit more. So nothing compared to the Cote de Beaune and Cote de Nuit. And now a lot of French wine, a lot of French people who love Burgundy wines, they just go to the Coachellanes because they cannot spend anymore going buying wines in the Cote de Beaune and Cote de Nuit, wines that have become too expensive. The Mâconnais now, if you continue to go south, I think the best place that's the Pouilly-Fuissé appellation. So don't be confused with Pouilly-Fumé. Here I'm talking about Pouilly-Fuissé. Okay, I really find that the quality has improved a lot these last years at Pouilly-Fuissé. So I usually in the past I was finding those wines. There was a lack of acidity, too much body and alcohol, and now the wines are much more balanced than they used to be. So that's good. That's great. All right. So last thing I want to say about Burgundy. If you buy a bottle, it's also important to keep in mind the best vintages. I'm giving you here the best recent vintages in Burgundy. So remember 2005 and 10 for both whites and reds. 2014 for me is a great year for the whites, especially for the whites. Maybe a bit less for the reds, but that's great for the whites. I love this vintage. And more recent, 2015 and 2016. I think 2015 and 16, that's interesting because you can still find the wines on the market. It's much harder to find a 2005 or 10. You might find some 2005 or 10, but you would pay the price for this. So you can still find some affordable 2015 and 16 today on the market. Okay? And more recent, 2017 and 18. I think 2016, that's one of my best vintages in Burgundy, but not only Burgundy, in other French regions. All right, so we arrive at the end of the presentation. If you have any question, that's the time. Just want to let you know also that I'm doing a masterclass tomorrow about the France legendary wines, where I'm going to be talking about the best Chateau and Domaine. So you can just find me on Facebook or Instagram, and you can find information on this class for tomorrow. So now back to the presentation today. So if you have any questions, if Marianne, you see some questions on the chat on Facebook or else, just let me know.
Yes, thank you a lot, Alexis. Actually, we have a question, so let me read it. Based on which criteria the wine is classified as Premier or Grand Cru as high wine quality, and this classification can be adopted everywhere, or only in France? So this is basically the question.
So this is France, and this one especially is just Burgundy. So the things that don't change a lot in France. It has been established a long time ago in the middle of the 20th century, and it has remained like this. So it's based on the quality of the grapes, but again, you find the best plot of vines mostly on if you look at the landscape on the slopes because of the condition of viticulture, which are much better for the grapes here. More recently, let me come back to this one. There was some change. I mean, not change, but some new Premier Cru appellation that have just been created for Pouilly-Fuissé. So Pouilly-Fuissé in the Mâconnais. Now they have, since the vintage 2018, they have some Premier Cru as well. to the plot of vines, the best terroir. But it's just for France, and even not for France, that's for Burgundy. That's really for Burgundy, this one.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Alexis. So I think the question was answered.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me see if there are any other questions. Not yet. So if you want, we can continue with the last part.
Yeah, we can just wait a bit. Sometimes questions are just coming.
Okay, another question. Excuse me to interrupt you. What is the main difference between Burgundy and Bordeaux wines? The main difference. This is another question.
So two differences: the climate and the grape varieties. So first, I think that's the grape varieties. That's the main difference. They use other grapes, so other grapes make different styles of wines. So the grape variety, but they use other grapes because of different conditions, different climates, different soils. So usually when I describe wine, I think the thing that really makes the identity of the wine, the first thing, that's the grape variety.
Okay.
So this was an overview of the Burgundy, an overview of the Burgundy change every year, different vintages. You remember, they have more than 80 appellations, 84, and now they have also some premier cru at Pouilly-Fuissé. So recently I was talking with a journalist, American journalist, and he was an expert just on Burgundy wines, and he was 60 years old approximately, and he told me he had spent his life just in Burgundy. So at a first look, it looks simple because that's just two grape varieties, the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir. But then you have 80 appellations, 80 plots of vines, different terroirs, different appellations. So that's really interesting Burgundy for this. An expert just on Burgundy only. So at first Pinot Noir, but then you have.
Okay, that's great. I don't know if someone else has any other question, but so far I don't see any other questions. Let me check. I think I have something. Thank you first, Mrs. Layal Abu Atmi, for your question. Now we have another question from Mrs. Sabine Boustani, who is asking how winemakers are dealing with contrefaçon.
That's a very good question. Let me come back on this picture of the Romane Conti.
Sure.
Okay, for this one, maybe, yeah. Today, and since a few years ago now, a few wineries, they have hired people, some staff to deal with the contrefaçon and to travel in all over the world where there are some auction sales, okay? Because that's mostly on auction sales that you can track the fake bottles of wines. And so what they do in the domain, like the Romane Conti, for instance, first they put the number of the each bottle has some identification number, figures, so they can track. They know exactly at which person they have sold the wine, so they can track really where the bottles come from. And the famous wineries like the Romane Conti, they ask the clients not to sell the wines at auctions or anywhere, because they don't want people to get these bottles and to copy them. So if this happens, they always tell the client that they will be removed from the list, from this advantage to get a few bottles. So they are hired who are traveling and who are tracking wines. So they check the auction sales all over the world, but they also check all these online websites where you can buy bottles of wines. So they are very careful about this. Yeah, but that's really tricky because I know, especially in Asia, some people are designing fake bottles, but fortunately, they always make some mistakes on names of. So it's not that difficult to find a fake bottle.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering the question. So those are the questions, Alexis. Don't know if you want to move to the last part. You have something to add?
Oh, just saying that I'm doing another masterclass tomorrow. If some people want to join, I'm going to talk about France legendary wine, and I'm going to come back on this Romane Conti and some other famous wines from Bordeaux or the Rhône. So it will be a continuity a bit to Burgundy, but also about other wine regions in France. But if you have any other questions.
I don't think so. So far, I don't have any other questions. I don't know if Mr. Jones, Mrs. Azam, Mrs. Abu Atme, Mrs. Fradi, Mrs. Bustani, Mr. Joe as well. If you have any other questions before we end the presentation tonight. So basically, Mr. Jones thanked us as well for the presentation tonight. And I want to thank you also, Alexis, for your presentation, for giving us more information about the Burgundy wines and the high quality of wines in this region of France. And we hope to see you very soon in other webinars. Thank you very much. And we hope we will be joining your masterclass tomorrow as well.
Sure.
Let me see. So they are only thanking you and thanking us. So thank you for this continuous collaboration with the Passeport Culinaire. And we'll see you very soon. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, that's a pleasure to do this presentation. So I will be happy to do another one next time.
We hope that too. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank all the participants. Thank you for being with us tonight, even though it was a bit late tonight, but you're always welcome to attend our webinars. And we'll see you very soon, hopefully next week. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. So I wanted to add live now that next week, actually, we are going to host Le Nôtre. So Le Nôtre, it's a culinary school in Paris. So we are going to have a live cooking class, one in the cuisine and one in pastry. So we hope also to see you all for this additional and another webinar that will be also broadcasted live. Okay, thank you very much and have a good night, all of you. Thank you.